So today we're going to be talking about unlimited connection and corporate prayer, which is basically when you pray together in like a church and a community. But when I was like looking at notes and talking about it, I was like, it basically said that when people think they're praying individually, they never actually are, because we never actually pray alone, even if we're just physically there on our own, because our prayers are always heard by the Father and encouraged alongside prayers of the Son and lifted by the Spirit. So technically we never actually pray alone, even if we're physically there on our own. And I think that was a really cool to think about. And also, corporate prayer goes as back as prayer itself does, because in Acts, which was when like Jesus had gone, and which is basically the early church, corporate prayer, prayer is mentioned 21 times, and they're all corporate. So basically, if we want to learn from Jesus and the early church, it's basically corporate prayer, because their Jesus was tangible and recent, because he was there in their lifetime, and they prayed together because it encouraged them and it grew their faith. And now, in our busy lives as Christians, faith and prayer really leans towards individual prayer, because we have such busy lives, but it's more corporate, and that's more important, and it's how we come together in faith that creates unity and helps us learn so much more about prayer and how to pray and how we pray in a community. And I really like this church because I think it's a really family-orientated church, and it's like how, like as Katie said this morning, it's very much we all came together for Church on Toast, and we were all together, and we were eating together, and we were talking together, and I think that's really cool because it shows how we're all part of God's kingdom, and we're all together, and we all agree in his name that on a Sunday morning this is the most important place to be, and this is where we need to be. As we sing, that raises our voices together in his name, and we just feel like this is the most important place to be, and I think that's really cool. And as I already said, it brings like togetherness, and when we all pray together, it brings like a united voice and a roar to the heavens, which is really cool. And it's not like when we pray on our own, that's not as good as when we pray all together, but it just brings encouragement, especially if you're struggling with something and you're praying together, and then people are like, oh yeah, I'm struggling with that as well. And I think that's really cool that can also let us all great encouragement basically. And yeah, and also because it's a coming together for all people, it shows that all individual prayers are valued equally, and that like if you think that you're inferior to everyone else, that's not true, because a lot of the time in church we are very it's the worship leader and the preacher, and everyone's like, oh well, they must be more important because they're standing at the front, or they seem to be more into your relationship with God. They seem to be more like, well, they're more spiritual than me and I can never get up to that. But in corporate prayer, it shows that the prayer of a saint and the prayer of like a crying child that's just been born and is innocent and knows nothing of God, never been to church, but that is the same. Like you're no one's ever more important than, and when you're praying on your own, going back to my first point, and when you're praying on your own and you feel like there's no one actually there, there's no one listening, there is. And I feel like a lot of people just see prayer as something you do, like as a ritual, something you do when you're sitting there in bed and you're like, well, I need to pray because that's what my family does, or that's what I'm told to do. But it's like we're not programmed to pray at a certain time of the day. We need to be able to pray because we want to, and that will grow our relationship with God. And I feel like in the last year since I got baptised, it's got a lot easier for me to pray, because it's not like I'm praying just because it's something that my parents do. Because I've always been brought up in church. Like, it's always been something that I come to church every Sunday, and it's like our family do it. But like, since I've got baptised, it's been much more, I want to do that. And like, because I'm a child, and because I'm a youth now, I'm not less, and my prayers are not less than someone who's been going to church for like 50 years or 60 years, but it's just like we're all the same. And in Matthew 21, we find a powerful image of when Jesus is like saying that he has seen like the saints and the Pharisees in the church, and they're praying and they pray these long prayers, but actually we see a new reality of Jesus where the cries of children are heard and valued by Jesus exactly the same as the prayers of saints and Pharisees, who were in that society were a lot more valued. And I think that's really cool, and it just shows us about God himself and how he has no bias between anybody. Like, you could be university educated or street educated, like, it doesn't matter. Like, because in this society we're like, oh well, people are valued because they've got like very expensive cars or they live in a nice house, but actually that's not what God intended it to be. He intended it to be that everyone was exactly the same, and he didn't really care if they were if they were higher educated or had more money or had a nicer job. And we have the same authority. Have the same authority when we pray. We have the same authority when we have the same authority when we lift our voices, because that he doesn't be like, oh, that person is the one that's a university lecturer, and that's the person who works in like, I don't know, I'm not going to offend anyone by saying a job, but like he responds to them, and that doesn't mean he responds equally, but he responds equally but uniquely. So like, I might pray for something that is like, oh well, we're going to change that in a different way because you maybe shouldn't want that so much. Maybe that was a bit selfish of you, but he's like, and like, when we pray, we all have the same authority, but someone might pray and it might be like someone might pray for healing, and then it might be immediate and they can walk again or something. And when people see that and they're like, well, I've been praying and that's not actually how I feel it's worked. But that doesn't mean that he's not answering your prayers. He's just answering uniquely to you. Like, because like as parents will recognise, I'm not a parent, obviously, but when you have your second and third child, you don't divide your love between the children. Your love multiplies. You're not like, well, I like that one more, so I'm going to give them like 60% of the love and like 40% can go to like the other child. But that's not how it works, because God's love is like multiplied, and each child like awakens the parental love in a different way, and they like need different types of loves. I'm looking at Mum now. Needs like different type of loves in different ways. And one child on one day might need more love than another child, and they might be like, I don't want a hug, thanks. And then one person will be like, I want a lot of like affection on that day. And I think it's just how each prayer's approach to the Father in a different way that is right for you and that is write for how you're feeling on that certain day or how much love you want. And I was listening to, other people talk on this subject, and it was like Deborah Green, who is like this massive like church leader who loves like prayer and praying for thousands in like your arenas. It was like Manchester Arena, and they were all praying for knife crime, and then like knife crime decreased by like 60%, which is really cool, but I don't think I could do that personally. I think it would be but like what I just thought was, it doesn't have to be in its thousands, because I don't know what verse it is. I'll find it. Matthew 18:19-20, it says, "Truly I tell you that if 2 and 3 on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by the Father in heaven. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am with them." And I think that's really cool, that it doesn't have to be in like 60,000 groups like of people all praying for one thing. It can just be 2 or 3 that pray for the same thing. So like I always, like when I'm struggling with something, but like something, I always talk to my mum and like, please can you pray for it as well? And it just sort of brings like a level of unity, but also a level of comfort that actually there is someone else who is actually praying for the same thing you are, which is really cool, because it's just like 2 people praying for the same thing, which I think is really cool. So, yeah.